Hello and welcome to CGTN. I'm Li Zhao, live here at the Great Hall of the People. Welcome to join us on our special coverage of the two sessions, the most important political gatherings here in China every year. So days ago, we've already seen the opening meeting of the 4th annual session of the 13th National People's Congress, and that's China's top legislature. And yesterday, we've already heard from Chinese State Councilor, and also China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi. And today, what's on our agenda? Let me brief you a little bit. So first, we are going to expect a group of NPC deputies. So they're selected from over, roughly 3,000 NPC deputies. So a group of them were selected, and they were from all different backgrounds. Some of them are construction workers. There are people working with cultural industry, and some of them are engineers, some of them working with wetland. So really pushing to do the ecology protection. So these people will be talking right in front of this blue screen. So this is called Deputies Corridor. So they will be taking questions from the media. This year, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, they will be exercising some kind of social distancing. So the media will be asking questions from the media center, and the deputies will be answering questions from here. So they're here to really answer questions of people's concerns, taking questions from media, both from Chinese media and also foreign media. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave your questions to our comment bar and let us know some of the most important concerns that you want to know more about China. All right, so right after Deputies Corridor, we'll be experiencing Mr. Li Zhanshu. He's the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, and he's set to deliver a work report of China's top legislature. Right after that, we'll be hearing work reports by the Supreme People's Court and also Supreme People's Procuratorate. So these two work reports are essential for China's future judicial work, and also they were summarized the achievements they've made back in the year of 2020. All right, some of the most important, let me take a look at my note. All right, some of the most important legislations that's high on agenda, including public health, because the COVID-19 pandemic is still soaring around the world. Although China has already declared victory to the pandemic, but we know there are also sometimes that the coronavirus will be popped up in some kind of areas here in China. So we want to know more about how China will be fairly distribute the COVID-19 vaccination, and also whether the free vaccination will be carried out across the world. And also something about Hong Kong. We know that improving Hong Kong's electoral system is also high on China's agenda these days. And number one issue is really to ensuring that patriots governing Hong Kong. What does that mean? So they want someone that genuinely love the country and love Hong Kong to really govern Hong Kong as a whole. And yesterday, Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi has already said the central government wants someone loyal to the motherland. And that's a basic political ethic for all public office holders. And Hong Kong is no exception. That's from Wang Yi. Another quote I get from yesterday, his press conference include, and I quote, "How can we expect someone who does not love his country to truly love Hong Kong?" So the law improving Hong Kong's electoral system is also something that we'll keep a close eye on. All right, so let's just give you a tour of the Great Hall of the People. And you can see this is, of course, a giant hall. And whenever there are reporters here at the Great Hall of the People, you know that something important is going on here. And this year, because of the COVID-19 is still going on around the world, we want to make sure that everything is safe. Everyone is safe, because we know that thousands of deputies come here, gather here, and really decide for China's future. So social distancing is of course in place. I'm not in mask right now because I'm doing live. Right after my live broadcast, I need to wear my mask back on. And you can see our staff members, they're all in masks. And right now they're preparing water for our NPC deputies. All right, speaking back of China's legislations, another important issue that we'll be looking at is China's civil code. It was adopted on January 1st this year, and according to Li Zhanshu, he's the chairman of NPC Standing Committee, he said this is an important milestone in China's achievement of the rule of law. So essentially, the civil code is a pileup of 1260 articles covering almost everything about people's life, from people's marriages to sexual harassment, from privacy rights to personality rights, and something about the property rights as well. So that's on civil code. We're looking for more revisions to the civil code. Will they carry out more details about that? That's something we'll be keeping a close eye on. Right back on our Deputies Corridor, you can see that's one of our deputies coming into the room, and just moments later he'll be going on to the podium and taking questions from the media. And one specific person I want to point out in today's Deputies Corridor is Mr. Zhao Li. All right, he's right there. Mr. Zhao Li is, of course, one of the leading experts at promoting. This is Dr. Zhao Li, and he's one of the leading experts of China promoting the role of TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, in his fight against COVID-19. This is our deputy, Mr. Zhao Li. He'll be taking questions from the media just minutes after. Right, so let's give the deputies some time, because this is their, just minutes after they will be going on to the podium answering questions. Again, if you have any questions, leave your questions down below and let me know all of your concerns, your questions about China's political system, about China's judicial system. Let us know. All right, some of the highlights from last year's work report. Because China is really striving to become a law-based governance in all respects, some of the highlights of last year's report including to ensure the full implementation of Constitution in all respects of state governance, and also continuing to improve China's socialist legal system. So China is really trying to make sure that the legal system works well under its socialist system of Chinese characteristics, and also advancing the oversight work of the officials. You want to make sure that there's someone here to monitor the works of the officials, and also improving the working system of NPC deputies for their law-based performance of their duty. All right, what does NPC deputies really performing their duties mean? That means that those people, they will be hearing from the general public, because they're selected from all walks of life. Really, we want to hear from either their colleagues, their close friends, or someone around them, know their concerns, know their problems, and have them taking the questions to the capital Beijing and discuss all the questions and problems and concerns to all the deputies around the country, and have them to hopefully make some law and getting some legislation done. All right, some of the other issues that we want to look at is last year. Oops, where's my note? Let me take a look. All right, so in 2019, that's from last year's work report, NPC Standing Committee deliberated 48 drafts of laws and decisions and adopted 34 of them. So you may sound the number is not that much, but given the fact that China is such a populous country, it has 1.4 billion population, you know that if every single deputies have something on the board, they want to deliberate thoroughly with the 3,000 deputies. So that's a hard work to do. All right, if our camera can pan to the side, you can see right now everyone is really just about to preparing for the press conference for the Deputies Corridor. And as I've said, some of the deputies selected this year, including, right, he's going on to the podium, Dr. Zhao Li. He's the one that pushing for the TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, for a long time. And alongside him, right besides him, is Mr. Zhou Bin. I've actually had the honor talking with him days ago. He's a 25-year-old lawmaker who is a construction worker. So really selected from the grassroots level. All right. So CGTN is going to bring you live broadcast throughout the time, and we'll be broadcast the whole session of Mr. Li Zhanshu's speech. We'll be broadcasting you Mr. Li Zhanshu's delivered the annual work report of China's top legislature. Stay with us. All right. Once again, I'm Li Zhao. Thank you so much for watching, and stay with us.
And journalists this year are gathering at a media center, another location not very far from the Great Hall of the People. And this event is conducting virtually this year, and it's happening right now. You're watching live footage from the Deputies Corridor.
From People's Daily, my question is to Zhang Boli. Last year, as one of the expert panel of the COVID-19 fighting group, you have been working in the front line in Wuhan. Could you share with us about your feeling last year? Thank you for your question. Last year, in face of the abrupt outbreak of the COVID-19, under the leadership of the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping as the core, the Chinese people have been united as one, and all the medical staff have been working around the clock to save every life, leading to a final victory of this war. If you ask me of my impression of this experience, then I was mostly impressed by those young medical staff. Some of them were born in the 1980s, mostly, who were the dominant fighters in this war. Some were even born in 1990s or 2000s. This age group accounts for 70% of the total staff of medics. They were only children in their families. Could they shoulder this responsibility? We were doubtful in the beginning. But in this battle, they sacrificed and dedicated themselves to undergo this examination. If the medical staff could be said as the cutest people in the society, we take it as our responsibility on our shoulders. But what's really impressive and touching is that the Chinese people put their faith on the CPC, and everyone is honoring their commitment with their actual deeds. To give you two examples, the first day I arrived in Wuhan, I went to the hospital and I took a taxi. That taxi was actually a private car. The driver was an entrepreneur. He went from Heilongjiang province to Wuhan as a volunteer. I asked him, who paid for the fuel in your car? He said, it's self-paid. And I thanked him when I got off the car, and he said that the thanks could also go to you, because when we were in a war as a nation, everyone is responsible. And in my actual work in the front line, I needed a lot of medicines, and the supply was tight in those days. So I called someone I know from a TCM enterprise asking for help. I said that maybe I am too demanding. I need thousands of those medicine units every day, and you have to guarantee me about the full supply for several consecutive months. And also you have to boil the medicine and send them to our designated hospital in Fangcang to my doorstep. And finally I said I had no money. I don't even know who will pay you. And that entrepreneur answered instantly that just stop it, and my answer is yes. He said that to save lives, I can do anything. So to be honest, if you ask me who is the cutest person in this war, I would say that whether it's the warriors fighting in the front line or those working in the backstage, as long as they contribute to fighting this war, they are the cutest. Now, we maintain a stable situation in China, but we still have to bear in mind the task of containing the transmission imported and curbing the transmission within our borders. Also, we have to be precautious and stay vigilant ahead of the outbreak, and also as the regular measures like good ventilation, avoid gathering, we must be firm, and I believe we will win the final victory. Thank you. Next question.
So, gentlemen, that was Mr. Zhang Boli. He is deputy to the MPC, and also we still recall that he is a people's hero bestowed by the country for his contributions during China's tough fight against the pandemic last year. So the question was raised to him about his experience, his feelings during that whole process, but he didn't talk about himself. Actually, he talked about the young people, the young medical workers, and he talked about the sacrifices and contributions made the Chinese people. So, Dr. Gao, what is the biggest legacy left behind by that fight against the pandemic for China?
Well, everyone pitched in, everyone got involved, and everyone united behind the leadership of the Communist Party and the Chinese government. And China prevailed against this pandemic. China has put this pandemic more or less under control, even though we still face a lot of challenges, especially imported cases, and also the possibility of resurgence, of bouncing back of this pandemic. But generally speaking, among all the countries in the world, China is actually done very exceptionally well in putting this pandemic under control. And this is mostly thanks to putting science ahead of everything else, and everyone is mobilized. Everyone is doing his or her job. And I think Professor Zhang Boli, who is a national hero, who really is winning all the acclaims for rushing to the real forefront in Wuhan during the first weeks of the outbreak of the pandemic. He really cared about the people, cared about what he was doing, and cared about emphasizing the importance of Chinese medicine in saving more and more life in this pandemic. So I think we are very grateful that we have such a country, such a government, and such a wonderful nation who can really perform under the duress of the situation. Everyone pitched in, everyone did his job or her job.
Indeed, everyone pitched in, but Mr. Zhang also mentioned that everyone also followed the leadership and the call from the CPC. What do you make of this whole governing system when China is faced with a big challenge?
Well, I mean, there's more than one part. I mean, they're obviously talking about the leadership of Xi Jinping, but there are so many components to this, and that's what he was really bringing out. He didn't talk about himself. He talked about what other people did, their willingness to act. He didn't say, I called a party member. What he did is said, I called somebody I knew, and they reacted. He told little stories that really talk about the heroism, not of himself, but of all those around him. And you know, this is what's really important. But to get all of this organized takes the entire government. And there are people who are working, you know, countless, millions and millions of hours, making sure that the logistics were correct, you know, making sure that the hospitals were doing the work, that it was coordinated. All of these things are very, very important. You can see that in, you know, in terms of what's happening in Europe and the United States, you know, two advanced countries where they just can't quite seem to get it right at the national and local levels to deal with what has become an increasingly more severe problem because they have let it go too long. I mean, these variants are, it's mathematical. The longer they're, you know, you allow this kind of pandemic to go unchecked, the more variants you have, the more problems there will be. And it's unfortunate. Hopefully they can learn that they're not going to copy China's system, but certainly having being a state of preparedness having the communication, the logistics to deal with this, I think everybody sees that that is vital going forward.
Right, gentlemen, now let's get more updates on the ongoing political season. This year marks the first year of China's 14th five-year plan, a blueprint for economic and social development through the year 2025. The plan lays out the country's strategy to achieve high-quality development. Chinese President Xi Jinping stressed that high-quality development is the general requirement for all aspects of economic and social development. In the next 5 years, the country's focus will be on the real economy with a strategy of dual circulation. China will set up a new growth strategy to nurture a strong domestic market and foster a new development pattern. It will also further open up to integrate its domestic market with the global economy. Innovation will remain a key drive for growth, and China aims to be self-reliant in leading technologies. Rural areas in the country will be given special attention with a focus on food security and modernizing the whole agricultural industry. As for the environment, China says it will further promote sustainable development to balance economic growth with protecting the environment. So, gentlemen, let's talk about this 14th five-year plan. How about we start with environmental protection and the carbon issue? Now, I noticed that some Western media are saying that, okay, there's no specific targets. I think they mean numbers or rates laid out in this plan. But do you think that should be an issue, because China has raised this grand design of carbon peaking by the year 2035 and carbon neutrality by the year 2060? So, and we must say that this 14th five-year plan proposal was raised in October. So do you think China should come up with a plan with specific numbers in such a short time of almost 4 months? Dr. Gao.
Well, I think President Xi Jinping, on behalf of the whole country of China, the whole nation of China, has already proclaimed the 2030 goal and the 2060 goal. And this is very important, not only for China, but for mankind as a whole. I think the whole society in China, all the institutions, enterprises, government entities, individuals, all aspects of society have been fully mobilized. Everyone is doing his or her job as to what he or she can do to pitch in to help the whole nation achieve this. I'm confident that once the goal is clearly defined and once the deadlines are fully set up, for example, all of us need to do our job. And I think China is also doing all kinds of R&D and innovation, for example, to make sure that in addition to whatever we can do together, there are new ways and new thinking in helping China to achieve this carbon peaking by 2030 as well as carbon neutrality by 2060. So I hope the whole world will be rest assured China will not only deliver on these goals, but may be able to deliver them ahead of this deadlines.
And it's not only about carbon peaking, is it, Mr. Tangen? Because China is still in the process of industrialization and modernization. So do you think, how tough do you think will be this balancing between the two?
Well, it is going to be tough. I mean, in essence, what China has done is taken a very pragmatic approach. They're coming off a pandemic, which has had profound, even within China, effects on the growth. So there has to be some wiggle room, at least in the first year or two, until COVID is truly under control, to move things around. And that's why you're not seeing hard targets set up. But it doesn't mean that China is in any way abandoning it. I mean, the poverty alleviation ran into equal and very heavy problems because of COVID-19. And what it means, though, is that after they feel confident that they've adjusted to the new economic reality, remember, 4.4% downward growth, negative growth in the world today. That's going to have an effect after this initial period of catching up goes. So China, as I said, taking a pragmatic approach, it will then produce hard targets in order to meet its goal as it goes forward after the pandemic. And I think people are making too much. This is not a one-year plan. This is a 5-year plan.
Right. So talking about hard targets, how about the economic growth target raised by Premier Li Keqiang in his government work report over 6% rather than a very specific number? Whether do you think it will be 7%, 8%, or over 10%? What do you think is the reason behind its setting?
Well, there's a historical reason. China generally underestimates its progress and then overperforms. And that's been a thing. Most economists would agree that somewhere between 8 and 9% is where it'll probably be. But there's also this issue about GDP as a metric, because increasingly it doesn't make sense in an economy that is so globally interconnected. The supply chain kind of warps it. So I think they're starting to look more and more at more specific things.
Right.
Yeah,
right. Ms. Tango, we'll continue this very soon. Now let's again cross live to the Deputies Corridor.
Thank you. I'm with China Media Group. My question is directed to Fan Yongzhen. The CPC Central Committee and the central government attach great importance to the development of rural areas, and we know that you are from Yunnan and you are also a cultural worker at the grassroots level. Can you share with us the spiritual life of people living in rural areas? What are the most striking impressions? Thank you very much for showing interest in people living in rural areas. I'm from Lijiang of Yunnan Province. My name is Fan Yongzhen, and today is the International Women's Day, and I would like to send a greeting to all the women watching. And as for your question, I think I can give you the best answer from my work. And since taking my job, it has been 11 years, and I have witnessed the transformation of Lijiang Museum, which has transformed from zero to hero, and each and every year we have the investment of 100 million, and each and every year we have some development and allocations of funds from the government, and this shows the great support from the government. And because of this financial support, we are more confident in engaging in cultural development, and so that is why our museum is open to the public 365 days throughout the year. And also, throughout the year, we are able to accommodate more than 100 cultural activities, and we also have a digital museum, and these 100 activities, they can be conducted online and offline in a synchronized manner. Last year, we organized a youth singing competition. And in that competition, we have attracted 750,000 people. So this accounted for 55% of the whole population of the city, which was a record in Lijiang City. For 8 consecutive years, we have organized an event attracting painters and photographers to talk about the story of Lijiang. And because of this activity, a lot of the senior citizens had their first family photo in their life. And we also have activities such as free training classes for children who are from the rural areas. So even during the holiday, they are able to attend artistic classes and trainings. And today, I just want to share with you one small story that I have encountered. That was around the Spring Festival of 2012, and when we were giving a cultural performance to a place, we arrived at an ancient town in Lijiang, and when we were about to leave that place, Grandma Li gave me a book which she held for 40 years. It was published in 1972. It was a book, a collection of a photography in commemoration of Chairman Mao's remarks at the Yan'an meeting on cultural development. She told us that we have to take good care of the book, and she was very grateful to our support. She said that she had no other gift to us but this book, And she gave this book to us because we are cultural practitioners. At that moment, I know that I did not just receive a book, I received great love and support from those people. And this love and support is part of the Chinese culture, which attach a great importance to the development of culture. And this love and hope exists in the blood of people of all ethnic groups in China. And this love and hope are the reason why we are committed to the jobs that we do as cultural workers. As a deputy from rural areas, I will never let down the expectations of my colleagues and people in the rural area, and we will carry forward the fine culture and fine traditions of the Chinese nation. And on the journey of renewing our nation, we have to write a new chapter.
Well, gentlemen, that was Ms. Fan Yongzhen from southwest China's Yunnan province. She is an NPC deputy from Lijiang city, worked in cultural promotion, and March 8th coincides with the International Women's Day, so I think it would be proper to extend regards. So how about we start with women's representation in China's top legislature, Dr. Gao?
Well, first of all, let's express our congratulations to all the women in China as well as throughout the world for this very important Women's Day celebration. In China, gender equality is, I think, one of the best among the world. And I think females' participation in workforce is very widespread. I think China leads many other countries in this particular regard. What's lacking in gender equality is among the very top echelons of the leadership. For example, board directors of major companies, governors and party secretaries or ministers in the central government, for example. Then in these very high-level, high-ranking positions, you see less women. So I think one goal we should set is that we will have more ladies be promoted to these high positions of importance so that they can share their wisdom and share their experience with the rest of the nation. And all of us can benefit with more female participation, not only in workforce as a whole, but very importantly in top leadership roles in China.
What do you make of this, Mr. Tangen?
Well, I'm not in favor of putting people in who aren't qualified, but the fact is that women represent a massive resource. They're only 20% of the NPC. There used to be more. There used to be half the sky, things which would mean about 50%. So there is work to be done, and I'm not saying that because you say 50% women. What you want is you want to find the qualified women. Women represent a different approach to problems. It's often much more team-oriented, less about the ego. And I think that's a valuable contribution. You don't want a lot of testosterone in the room when you're making certain types of decisions. But overall, though, I mean, I think it's wonderful that China has a system which allows, in essence, grassroots feedback. In America, everybody, most people, you don't go to political school to become a candidate. You might study poli-sci, but there's this idea that fresh ideas can come into the system, and that's in essence what you have here. In addition to being legislators, these people all represent different walks of life, from the government, from culture, from medicine. And as a result, they serve as an active check in terms of making suggestions. As we've talked about before, the system in China is very complex. Everything, an idea starts at the top, but it has to go all the way down, province, cities, towns, villages, work units, and it has to be discussed, and there has to be a plan, a timeline, specific actions, and then it rolls all the way back at the top. So by the time something comes, there's millions and millions of man and women hours into it, but you still need this kind of common sense. Wait a second, how is this all coming together? Because without that, sometimes ideas can get kind of, they develop a life of their own, and no one wants to kill it because no one wants to say, oh gosh, this is a bad idea. So having a representative body like this who is guiding as well as participating in the process, very important.
So, Dr. Gao, what changes have you seen in recent years in China's legislative agenda to address some issues you just mentioned and Mr. Tangen mentioned, and what kind of changes are you expecting to see?
Well, I think over the years, the NPC has become more and more people-focused. That is, they devote more resources and attention to how to improve the living standards of the people, how to make sure that people benefit from the economic growth, and how environmental protection will benefit the people rather than hurting the people. And I think this means that the whole structure is becoming more human-focused, more humanistic driven. And I think
so what about women's issues you just mentioned? Let's start there.
Well, for the female participation in workforce as well as in top leadership, this is absolutely important. I agree completely with what Aneng just now mentioned. And also in China, for example, if you go to language schools, if you go to law schools, amazingly, female students account for, in many cases, more than 50%. So I think the overall trend is very positive. That means more females will graduate from universities, graduate schools, professional schools, and then they will pick up jobs in special professions which may have very important impact on society.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gao. Again, let's cross live to the corridor.
You come from Dongning of Shandong province, and you have been working in the sanitation sector. And as we know, the high-quality growth and river protection has become national strategy, and wetland development in the surrounding basin has become a higher call of the nation. So what's your take in your daily work about those strategies? Thank you for your questions. Hello, everyone. Hello, I come from Shandong Dongying. In 1993, I was part of the sanitation work, in charge of the toilet, the garbage site, and I've been in this post for 29 years, and I witnessed the transformative changes of the city with cleaner streets, blue skies for more days, and more beautiful wetland. The wetland is an integral part of the city, and more birds reside in this city. Over the years, what impressed me most was that when I was young, when it was dry in the Yellow River and there was no water in the well, I would follow my parents to get clean drinking water from far. We would fetch like a barrel of water and use 1/2 of them for washing hands and face, and as to the other part, they are to feed the animals. But now we have more water flow in the Yellow River right now, and even today, I treasure the valuable Yellow River water, and I saw the water tanks leaking water before, and I was heart-wrenched by such a waste. So I bought some electric parts and tried to maintain and repair the device, and finally I save about half of the water consumption. And later on, I did several rounds of improvement. Now we have developed the 4th generation of toilet water sensor, and now the water consumption is less than 1/3 of before. So under such an influence, I changed from a usual sanitation worker to become an engineer. As a technician, I also endeavored to become an example, so now I could be honored to be an NPC member. I believe that once we devote ourselves, we will gain something in return, even as a usual sanitation worker. We must innovate. What is innovation? Once we can solve the pain points in our daily work, and we can improve the work efficiency and quality with the self-invented devices and technologies, then we will save a lot of manpower, just as I did for the sanitation workers. Because of that thought, I had about 8 projects. I also won the new type of patent at the number of 34. I also conquered a lot of difficulties, standing at the number of about 9,000. I also tried to motivate more people to dive into this drive of invention and innovation by honing their skills. I also built the studio named after myself, and I taught about 30 people. Now, those people have become backbone in their posts. Some are now the labor examples. And because of those efforts over the past years, what we are doing are reshaping the sanitation work towards higher quality results. I could say that in Dongying of Shandong province, located in the estuary of Yellow River, sanitation has become different from before. We rely more on our skills. Yellow River is the mother river of the Chinese nation. Secretary General has always highlighted the development of the Yellow River in a high-quality way, so we must implement the instructions of General Secretary Xi Jinping. And this year is the year of ox. So I want to also take solid steps to work in this post. I want to dedicate more efforts so that our homeland could be more ecology-based and more beautiful. And in these 2 sessions, I brought with me some suggestions about establishing a festival for sanitation so as to draw attention from certain departments and to improve the sense of pride of 3 million sanitation workers and also help them to attain a sense of security.
Oh, gentlemen, another grassroots deputy. He works in public sanitation in East China's Shandong province. He's a self-educated technician focusing on saving water in public toilets. How does this link to China's grand design of saving energy and building a better environmental protection, Dr.
Well,
Zhao?
I think in this particular regard, almost everything is interrelated. I think it will really require the efforts of individuals, families, society at large, and institutions, companies of all kinds, government, military, you name it, all need to pitch in, and no one should be left behind. Why? Because when we talk about the quality of the air, quality of the waters, quality of the soil or the earth, they are also related. So if we pollute one part of the ecology, first of all the other parts get polluted and contaminated, and if one person is contaminated, almost all society members become victims. So I think what this worker and the technician is doing is very important. He's not only doing his own job,
and
but also
in a
his society.
creative way. And how to better protect those innovations and creativity? Let's take a listen.
Innovation is protecting the enthusiasm of enterprises, and IPR is one very important institutional guarantee for the protection of innovation. Innovation is the first driver of growth. So the protection of IPR is to protect innovation. So when protecting IPR, we have to protect it from a legal perspective. As a practitioner in the industry, I'm very willing to see that since we have established the IPR protection system from the 1970s to China's accession to the WTO, and over the past 2 years, in light of China's own development, we are adjusting the law, and we have systematically amended and updated the law. So it's fair to say that China's IPR protection system has been established from a legal perspective, and we have already built a legal framework for IPR protection. As a researcher, we are living in an era of rule of law, and it's a great privilege to witness China's development in legislative building. Since serving as a deputy of the 13th NPC, I have participated in a lot of meetings and seminars on legislature. I have witnessed the development of China's rule of law. For example, on January the 1st this year, the Civil Code was officially enacted, and the 123rd article of the Civil Code touches specifically upon IPR protection, and in 2019, the law of trademark and the law against unfair competition have been amended, and another year we amended two other laws. These amendments are very important, and I have witnessed the amendments of these laws, and I feel very strongly in terms of investigations, surveys, and solicitation of opinions. In all these different processes, and there is this scientific-based and democracy-based rules and procedures. And let me share with you one little story, and that is in 2020. And that is the law about copyrights and IPR. And when the draft was finalized, the National People's Congress solicited opinions from all walks of social life and listening to opinions from enterprises, in particular foreign enterprises in China. So this has fully reflected the will of the people. And this is reflecting that legislation is in full compliance to the development of the society, and it's keeping up with the development of our time. So the systematic amendments of IPR protection law will show to the world that China, in the process of high-quality development, we are further committed to the protection of IPR. We are also showing to developed countries the achievements China has scored in protection of IPR. We are also providing some legal references to developed countries. The systematic amendments of IPR protection law will lay a solid foundation and legal guarantee for economic development in China.
Well, gentlemen, that was Professor Ma Yide. He's an expert in intellectual property rights protection. He said it very clearly. China has established a basic legal framework on IPR protection, and he also mentioned the importance of the new civil code in China, which defines intellectual property rights clearly. This opens open and transparent legal space for future practices. You work in legal area for quite some time, Dr. Gao. What's your reading into this?
Well, first of all, IPR protection is absolutely very important for China as well as for the whole world. Now, there have been several countries or political forces outside of China which have been accusing China of major IPR violations. I think it doesn't conform with the realities on the ground. I would say China is now fast emerging as a leading champion of IPR protection. Why? First of all, it's the right thing to do. Secondly, China is generating more and more IPRs, copyrights, patents, you name it. And so it is also in China's own interest to provide as much as possible IPR rights for Chinese companies and their rights as well as for international companies.
And do you think that's why China has registered the world's most patents last year?
Absolutely. And I think the trend is also picking up very rapidly. So I think in another 5 or 10 years' time, the world will be very much impressed with how much IPR rights are being generated out of China and how much Chinese people and Chinese government are willing and dedicated to protecting IPR. So I hope those several Western countries will really take a rest in falsifying the truth and try to spread the rumors against China as far as IPR rights are concerned. No country can achieve China's rapid economic growth for the past 41 years if, for example, it does not care about IPR rights. So I think Delegate Ma is saying the right thing, and we also need to be very much supportive of this protection of the IPR rights by the government, by the courts, by the police, and by those people who own these rights, as well as anyone who benefits from using these IPR rights.
And Mr. Tang, you're no stranger to legal practices. Would you say the focus should be more on implementation, as Dr. Gao just mentioned? It's about how to practice them in reality.
Well, China not only has the laws on the books, and they're among the most advanced, but the issue is enforcing them. And what China has done is set up separate courts, IPR courts, where the people are knowledgeable, and also taken away the local jurisdiction, because you don't want to be fighting a local company if you're not from that area. So these have been very important reforms. And right now, actually, China is one of the best places in the world to register your IPR, because if there is a violation, although you won't get perhaps as much money as you would in the US, it will happen very quickly. In the US, you could spend 10, 20 years, 30 years. There have been antitrust cases that went on for more than 50 years. Not antitrust, I mean violations of IPR. So it's one of these things where it's better to get a quick result. China is now able to do that, and they're continuing. And as Victor said, there was this progression. When China joined the WTO, it really didn't have much IPR. Now it is the leading IPR generator in the world, and it has switched just from quantity to lately a lot of quality. The things we talk about, AI, facial recognition, 5G, these are all things that are being developed within China. And as China moves on, and I echo Victor on this idea that you cannot have innovation unless you protect it. So this is going to be crucial going forward, and should be a real sign to companies outside of China that they can do business here.
Well, gentlemen, we'll be getting back to you very soon. Our coverage continues. China's new economic strategy of geo-circulation is a loop of two phases. In a domestic circulation phase, the domestic market is a key driver. But the sustainable growth of the domestic market lies in innovation, as we just talked about it. So what spurs innovation? It's self-reliance in the technology sector. Take a look.
Artificial intelligence, 5G networks, quantum computing, and blockchain ledgers are now commercial. As their use becomes more widespread in production processes, these technologies are expected to increase the size of China's domestic market and its competitiveness.
The digitalization of manufacturing industries will continue, and new intelligent products will be cultivated so as to promote development in a shared economy. This can ensure digital industrial structures with international competitiveness.
Technological innovations are crucial if China is to become less prone to the whims of market monopoly or geopolitical tensions. The innovative design of Guangzhou Automobile's assembly workshop has enhanced the company's productivity and thus improved its market competitiveness.
The final assembly workshop is one of our ingenious designs. The L-shaped workshop saves space and is good for the increasing of automation rate. Our cars are assembled fully automatically, including the installation of car window and run-flat tires. These are all applications of advanced technologies.
Mastery of existing scientific knowledge and building on engineering and scientific research emerge as the two important ingredients necessary for industrial development. The creation of high-tech products homegrown from the ground up is expected to boost not just the quantity, but the quality of domestic consumption. Innovation is also a driving force in other advanced disciplines, which the country hopes to reap benefits from in the future. The Institute of Deep Sea Science and Engineering is dedicated to developing ocean resources. Other industries are harnessing the Institute's technologies for commercial use.
Our research products are first used in scientific research and then transformed into a commodity. This is a standard practice radiated by general research institutes. The core technology is provided. Enterprises will carry out the subsequent commercialization.
Domestic circulation is not confined to China. Technology exchange will continue to be the basis for innovations in China's domestic market. China's Deep Sea Institute has both contributed to and benefited from global cooperation.
Scientists from all over the world need to work together. We hope to launch a global deep sea research project focusing on ecological, geological processes and physical ocean processes. At the same time, it also drives the development of this ultra-deep water technology.
China's innovations are also at the policy-making level. E-commerce has played a significant role in China's poverty reduction and rural revitalization efforts. Statistics show that 98% of poverty-stricken villages in China had installed online optical fiber cables. Nearly 97% of townships had set up logistics service outlets, and e-commerce service centers are part of China's countryside. Villages have boosted their income of their farm or cultural products thanks to live streaming, which allows them to promote and sell to the rest of the country and even the world. It's proof of technology helping China achieve its goal of poverty eradication in 2020, 10 years ahead of the timeline set by the United Nations, while stimulating domestic consumption.
China is basically building a e-commerce infrastructure. Now this huge infrastructure network is reaching every little corner of the country, and that provides a immensely important facility for poverty alleviation. Many small villages, remote villages, are now able to sell not just to the entire country, but entire world actually.
To ensure the strength of domestic circulation, China is exerting efforts in independent innovation and technological breakthroughs.
So, Ms. Tengen, let's continue to talk about this. Earlier you mentioned some advanced technological sectors, for example, facial recognition, AI, 5G. So let's put them into the context of China's 14th five-year plan, the grand design for the next 5 years. Would you say they will be divided into two major focuses? One is on those really cutting-edge sciences that may not generate quick return, but it's quite important for the long development of the whole country. And the other one is the applied technologies, focusing on solving those choking points, if you will.
Yeah, well, no, I would agree with that. I mean, you have quantum computing. That's definitely going to be the platform for the future. It represents, beyond Moore's law, this kind of doubling every so often. This is just a watershed event because you'll be dealing not with a binary code, but a trinary code. And that's an example of where you're putting money in now to be a leader in the future. But, in terms of things right now, there are choke points, especially when it comes to chips. Because of the U.S. action. And in many respects, people watching should understand that this was not something that China started out with 5 years ago. This is something that has been forced on China because of actions taken mostly by the U.S. in terms of saying, no, you cannot participate in our industries, you cannot buy our technology, you can't even buy the goods themselves. And this is costing the U.S. So in those areas, China has to react. It cannot, take the political risk that the U.S. is going to flip the switch on and off when it wants. But there are also practical applications. When you talk about drones, the China private maker of drones is the leading drone maker in the world, and this makes a huge difference, especially in something like agriculture. Now you can have active monitoring of your fields, real-time crop estimates in terms of what will be needed in terms of water, fertilizer, and also yields. Very, very important to stop these boom and bust cycles that you have with, we were talking about chickens and pigs and wheat and corn. Instead of that, farmers can go on to an online database and literally see, if I plant today, what will be my expectation when the crop comes. And that'll be based on a national basis where people are able to take this huge amount of information and then do it. What does that do? It stabilizes incomes in rural areas because now they're not
exactly. As we're talking about this, the main event of this afternoon is coming up. And for more on that, let's cross live to our reporter Zhao Bing in a media center. She's been following this very closely. Hello, Zhao Bing. Remind us of the key items on the agenda for the upcoming event this afternoon.
Yes, Pandan, we are already halfway through this year's 2 sessions. And up next, the agenda is the second plenary session of this year's National People's Congress, and deputies of the NPC are gathering at the Great Hall of the People to listen to Li Zhanshu, the chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, to deliver a work report which will cover the review of the work of the past year and also the planning for 2021. To better understand the work report, we need to know a little bit more about the role of the Standing Committee of of the National People's Congress. It is a permanent body of NPC, and the major responsibility will cover like judicial interpretation as well as making and supervising laws. So what to expect in this afternoon's work report? Actually, members of the Standing Committee have already discussed the contents of the work report. We may get some clues from that. The members say the Standing Committee have successfully implemented the Constitution and improved the legal system. So what's in specific it's about that? And also the members say the Standing Committee has accelerated legislation as well as made rapid progress in key areas. So how rapid the progress is and what areas are they? And lastly, how effectively and how well has the Standing Committee managed to exercise its supervisory power? So these are the 3 points that we may pay attention to in this afternoon's work report. And apart from that, the work report will also include the planning for 2021. As this year is especially important as it is the beginning of the 14th five-year plan, it also marks the 100th anniversary of China's founding of Chinese Communist Party. So it's really worth keeping an eye on that to see is there any new plans coming out or promoting new laws. Also on the agenda is the work report from the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate. So these 3 documents will be reviewed over the second half of this year's National People's Congress. So the meeting is going to take place. It's going to start in just a matter of minutes. So it's really high time for us to turn our attention to the Great Hall of the People. Pan Deng.
Thank you very much, our reporter Cao Bing in Beijing. Now, let's talk to our studio guest for more insight. How about this, gentlemen? So the work report will be delivered by Chairman Li Zhanshu, will be mainly focused on China's legislative agenda and the actual work in the year 2020. Let me ask you about one item that impressed you the most last year. Let me start with you, Dr. Gao.
Well, I think last year one landmark enactment of law is the national security law for Hong Kong, which is really of global repercussions. Certain Western countries are highly critical. They condemn this legislation. But the people in Hong Kong benefit from that. Why? Because it makes sure that stability and rule of law will prevail in Hong Kong, and people no longer worry about anarchy and violence, arson, for example. And
right.
I think
so what about you, Mr. Tengen?
Civil code. Bringing together all of the aspects of the society, going through a complete rewrite of all the laws, harmonizing them into a system where those who abide by the rules will benefit and those who break them will not. And I think this is a landmark part of what China has done and something other countries should be looking at, because there's, you look in England, they have anachronistic laws that go back ages, no one has bothered to even change them. I think it would be a huge benefit for all countries to review their laws periodically to make sure that they're accomplishing the contract that the government has with the people.
So earlier we mentioned pandemic. What do you make of China's legislative efforts in that particular regard, public health, Dr. Gao?
Well, first of all, in the fight against pandemic in China, China cannot win this fight without, for example, innovation and the widespread use of 4G and 5G network and smartphones. And China's breakthrough is very much based on innovation as well as a revolutionary mindset, how to balance the individual rights with their responsibilities. Now, rights without responsibilities will not work, especially for a country with such a large population in China. And if you only focus on your rights to the negligence of your responsibilities, then you cannot really have real democracy or human rights. So at any given time, especially in a crisis mode, when a pandemic hits, how do you balance and recalibrate rights versus responsibilities is a crucial thing. Now, the NPC throughout last year, not only at the national level, but also at provincial and local level, enacted lots of new laws and regulations to enable the fight against the pandemic, especially, for example, in terms of setting up testing, tracing, for example. On the personal level, I do not want to be inconvenienced with all the taking of my personal temperature, but I know now for sure that this is absolutely the necessary thing. I need to sacrifice a little bit of my personal freedom for the greater good of the whole society. And I think MPC in this regard has been doing a wonderful job for 2020, and I think there is a lot of expectation that this time, at this particular session, there will be more fine-tuning of the rules and regulations and laws which will enable China as a society as a whole to be more effective and more constructive in the fight against pandemic. And this sets China in sharp contrast with some of the Western countries because they cannot figure out how to balance this rights versus responsibility.
Right, so the session is about to start. Let's see how will those issues mentioned by you gentlemen will be addressed in that report you're watching live footage from the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. The second plenary meeting of this year's MPC session is about to start. This is live footage from the Great Hall of the People. And the second plenary meeting of the MPC session this year is about to start. Chinese President Xi Jinping, along with China's top leadership, is now entering the meeting venue. You're watching live footage from the Great Hall of the People. And one major item on this afternoon's agenda at the MPC plenary meeting is a work report delivered by the MPC Standing Committee Chairman, Mr. Li Zhanshu. Also China's Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate will deliver their work reports for last year. And you're watching live footage from the Great Hall of the People. This is the second plenary meeting of this year's MPC session. On agenda this afternoon, the chairman of the MPC Standing Committee, Mr. Li Zhanshu, is going to deliver a work report, and it's about to start very soon.
Fellow deputies, today is International Women's Day, and in the name of the presidency of this meeting, I would love to extend our congratulations to all the women workers and deputies present and women of China and abroad. Best wishes to you all. Fellow deputies, in today's plenary meeting, the quorum is 2,953, actual attendance is 2,895, 58 are absent, and the number of attendants is up to the standard. So now, let's begin this meeting. And there are 3 items on the agenda of today's second plenary meeting. The first one goes to deliberating the Standing Committee's work report of the MPC. And now let's invite the chairman of Standing Committee, Li Zhanshu, to deliver the work report.
Fellow deputies, on behalf of the Standing Committee of the 13th National People's Congress, I now present this report for your deliberation. The year 2020 was extraordinary in the history of People's Republic of China. The Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, responded to risks and challenges the world has rarely seen in a long time, and we have delivered a result that is recognized by the people and by the world. New achievements have been made in the building of the country, and these achievements encourage all of us that we need to further engage in the socialist modernization drive of China. Confronted with a complicated international landscape and challenging tasks of pursuing reform and development and ensuring stability at home, the NPC Standing Committee, under the strong leadership of the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, continued to follow the guidance of Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era, thoroughly implemented Xi Jinping's thinking on the rule of law, and fulfilled its duties and responsibilities. The Standing Committee took active steps to provide legal support for advancing major work plans. Over the course of the 10 months since the third session of the 13th NPC, the Standing Committee has exercised its powers of enacting laws, conducting oversight, making decisions, and appointing and removing officials. In total, we have deliberated 35 reports, and 13 existing laws have been approved. We also deliberated on 35 reports, and we also reviewed 6 laws, and we decided to ratify or enter into 7 treaties with foreign countries. We reviewed and passed 39 bills covering a total of 259 appointments of State Department's employees. The most prominent feature of the Standing Committee is that we focus on major CPC Central Committee decisions and plans, on the people's expectations for the rule of law in their pursuit of a better life, and on the legal requisites for modernizing China's systems and capacity for governance, in an effort to strengthen legislation and legal oversight to ensure that all aspects of our work concentrate more on the central task of economic development and the overall interest of the people and the country. For example, we strengthened the legal framework for wildlife protection. We issued a prompt decision to completely ban the illegal trade and consumption of wild animals. And we also focused on poverty alleviation and focused on agriculture-related efforts. Using the weapon of law, we improved business environment. All these are providing legal support to high-quality development of the country. All these efforts are in line with the requirements of the CPC Central Committee and the central government, and we are responding to the new expectations of the people. And we are also providing legal support and guarantee to the construction of the country in a new era. First, we strengthened the implementation of the Constitution and oversight of the constitutional compliance. Ensuring the full implementation of the Constitution is the most important task as we move forward. We improved the law relating to the Constitution. We also improved the NPC organic law, and over the past 30 years, since the law was enacted, it was amended for the first time. We also work to ensure constitutional order and the rule of law in the Hong Kong SAR. The disturbances that occurred in Hong Kong in 2019 over the proposed revisions to the extradition bill had a severe impact on the rule of law and public order. Last June, we conducted 2 meetings and reviewed the National Security Bill of Hong Kong SAR. In August and November last year, we passed the decision to add to this law. In this meeting, we are going to adopt a decision for improving the electoral system of Hong Kong SAR. The National People's Congress will stand firm in safeguarding China's sovereignty, security, and development interest in accordance with the law. And we will continue to perform our legally mandated duties and provide legal safeguards for ensuring constitutional order in Hong Kong, countering the force seeking Hong Kong independence, ensuring that those who love our country can administer Hong Kong. We promoted the spirits of the Constitution. According to the decision and plan of the CPC Central Committee, we made a decision to award some of the heroes, and followed by President Xi Jinping's signing of presidential order, we award Zhong Nanshan the Medal of the Public, and awarded Zhang Boli and Zhang Dingyu and Chen Wei the national honorary title of People's Hero. In 2020, we have received 1,310 pieces of legislation.
These included administrative regulations, local statutes, autonomous regulations, and so on. And we have also identified 3,378 normative documents in need of revision on repeal, and also a total of 5,146 suggestions for review from citizens and organizations. Second, centering on the overall work of the party and the country, we strengthened legislation in key areas. In this new era of socialism with Chinese characteristics, in response to the profound and complex changes in the international landscape and the rapid development of the cause of the party and the country, our legislative work moved into a new stage of accelerated development, marked by a large volume of expedited and higher standard legislation that covers a wide range of areas. We strengthened the enactment and revision of public health laws. We focused on developing a better coordinated and interconnected legal system and sped up the enactment and revision of laws to strengthen the rule of law with regard to public health, and we will have completed a further 11 objectives, including the wildlife protection law, practicing physicians law, and the law on the prevention and control of infectious disease. And to improve legal awareness and greater compliance, we work to ensure that the release of information on COVID-19, allocation of emergency supplies, handling of social issues and disputes, maintenance of order in the market, and others are all carried out in accordance with the law. We also accelerated legislation on national security, including the biosecurity law, the export control law, maritime traffic safety law, and the draft of data security law, the draft of a personal information protection law, as these laws cover economic security, resource security, nuclear security, and so on. We carried out our legislative work to promote high-quality development and high-standard opening up. We formulated the law on urban maintenance and development tax and the deed transfer tax law, revised the patent law and copyright law, and deliberated the drafts of a rural revitalization promotion law, a stamp duty law, and a Hainan free trade port law. We made decisions on establishing an IPR court in the Hainan free trade port and a financial court in Beijing. We also speed up social development and social governance legislation. We passed Amendment 11 to the criminal law, revised the law on the protection of minors, the law on preventing juvenile delinquency, and the administrative penalty law, and deliberated the drafts of a food waste law, an anti-organized crime law, a legal aid law, and a family education law, along with the draft revisions to the education law. For example, Criminal Law Amendment 11 is a revision to the criminal law that has drawn the greatest public attention in recent years. We made additions or revisions to 47 articles and covers workplace safety, food and drugs, order in the financial sector, the business environment, public health, biosafety, biosecurity, and other areas. The draft food waste law also carries forward the traditional Chinese virtues and calls for socially conscious, healthy, rational, and eco-friendly modes of consumer spending. We continue to improve ecological and environmental protection law. We continue to champion integrated innovation in our ecological and environmental protection laws. And The NPC Standing Committee has formulated or revised 12 laws, such as the Yangtze River Protection Law, the Law on Prevention and Control of Soil Pollution, and the Law on the Prevention and Control of Environmental Pollution by Solid Waste. The Yangtze River Protection Law was passed in December 2020. It was the first specialized law covering the whole river basin. This law took about 1 year for the full deliberation, and the Standing Committee also convened a symposium on its implementation in a timely fashion. By resorting to the force of law, we promoted that the Yangtze Economic Belt becomes a key model to benefit the people at large. We worked effectively to implement the civil code. Third, we conducted oversight of legal compliance and work performance in accordance with the law, thus providing support through oversight. We worked to ensure that our legally prescribed duties were carried out within the statutory limits. We advanced implementation of the Constitution and law, and we strengthened the examination and oversight of the plans, budgets, and final accounts of the government. We examined and approved the central government's final accounts for 2019, and we heard and deliberated report on the rectification of problems discovered through auditing and conducted special inquiries. We carried out research projects on preferential tax and fee policies and on tax and fee reduction policies for epidemic control. We advanced the reform for expanding the focus of budget examination and oversight. We also listened out to the State Council's decision on public securities law enforcement. And we fulfilled our duty of overseeing the management of state-owned assets. We tried to guarantee the sustainable development of our economy and society.
We also listened to the medium reports on reforms of enterprise innovations, and we also listened to the report of the Supreme People's Procuratorate on some other laws, and we have strengthened the fulfillment of laws and strengthened our punishment on illegal trade and on protection of wild animals, and the law on protection of soils and punishment of agriculture soil pollution, and also the law on anti-unfair competition. We focused on delivering blue sky and lucid water and clean soil, and for 3 consecutive years we have fulfilled the implementation of the law on protection agriculture soil and the charity law and the law on provision of public cultural services, and we have planted at the bottom of people's heart the idea of observing to these laws, and in so doing we are collecting the legal power in building a beautiful China. Fourth, we upheld the principal position of deputies and supported and assisted them in the law-based performance of their duties. Since the 3rd session of the 13th National People's Congress, we have reviewed all the proposals submitted by deputies, and a total of 9,180 suggestions made by deputies were referred to 194 organizations for handling. The more than 400 suggestions which were raised by deputies were handed over to 98 organizations for examination and handling. We improved the mechanism for coordinating the handling of proposals and suggestions raised by our deputies. We also maintained close contact with deputies. We invited more than 500 deputies to engage in law enforcement supervision. We also fostered close ties between deputies and the people according to the general arrangement of the Standing Committee. More than 1,800 deputies have participated in surveys and investigations, and we also strengthen the capacity of deputies in performing their duties, and the deputies are more aware in serving the people with their duties and responsibilities. We improved deputies' ability to perform their duties, and we also improved the handling of public complaints. In amending some of the laws, we are responding to the cause of the society.
Fifth, we effectively leverage the NPC's function and role in foreign relations in the service of the country's overall diplomatic work. And we focus on the main task of implementing consensus reached at the head of state level. We held 46 bilateral events at various levels via video link and attended 26 video conferences, made 15 phone calls, carried out 27 offline foreign affairs activities, and exchanged nearly 600 diplomatic letters. We stepped up friendly bilateral exchanges. We held the 6th meeting of the China-Russia Parliamentary Cooperation Committee and the 11th meeting of the China-France Parliamentary Cooperation Committee. We conducted exchanges with the state great hero of Mongolia. We also promoted multilateral exchange. We firmly safeguard multilateralism and the international system with United Nations as the core to safeguard the international order, abiding by the international law. We also try to emphasize the Chinese pathway and the Chinese system. We work to increase the international community's understanding of China's path and system, and we stood firm in protecting our national interests. We leveraged the role of spokesperson mechanisms in the NPC Standing Committee, the NPC Foreign Affairs Committee, and so on. The NPC belongs to the people. Under any circumstance and at any time, once needed by the party and the people, NPC will not hesitate to stand in the interest of our law, our diplomacy, so as to do our duties to the people. 6. We work to strengthen the Standing Committee's capacity to perform its functions through constant self-improvement. We hope to honor the rule of law, to promote democracy, to serve the people, and to function efficiently. So we will improve ourselves in all respects so that we can maintain a close contact with the people on behalf of the people, and we improved ourselves theoretically and politically. We raise awareness of the need to stay true to the party's founding mission and organized a thorough study of the 3rd volume of Xi Jinping, The Governance of China, and we held the 26th local legislative workshop to study the legal ideologies and thoughts of Xi Jinping. We communicated and studied important speeches made by General Secretary Xi Jinping on many occasions, including the thinking on the rule of law. We also aim to refine the Standing Committee's operating mechanisms by giving play to the special committees. We convened 152 such sessions to efficiently complete legislation, supervision, and other tasks. We coordinate the promotion of NPC's work to tell a good Chinese story and a good story of NPC stories of the deputy members. So, fellow deputies, the achievements made by the Standing Committee of NPC lies in abiding by the strong leadership of CPC Central Committee with Xi Jinping as the core and socialism with Chinese characteristics in this new era, so that the deputies of the Standing Committee of NPC, the different special committees, and the organs of special committees could honor their commitments and take solid steps. It also lies in the State Council, the National Supervision Committee, the Supreme People's Court, Supreme People's Procuratorate, and different local People's Congress efforts. It is also thanks to the participation of people of all ethnicities. So hereby, on behalf of the Standing Committee of NPC, I want to pay my sincere thanks.
We still have some gap in our work, and this means that we have to improve the quality of legislation, we have to enhance supervision, and we also need to improve the representation of our deputies, and the members of the NPC have to listen to views from all sides so that we can comprehensively enhance our work. Fellow deputies, the Central Conference on Comprehensively Promoting the Rule of Law established the guiding position of Xi Jinping's thinking on the rule of law. General Secretary Xi Jinping has given important speeches for the work of People's Congress on many occasions. He has charted the course and provided the principles for upholding the system of People's Congress. The rapid development of the cause of the party and the country has enriched the practice of People's Congress. On a new journey, we have to leverage the political foundations and advantages of the NPC and put people in the first place. And through the NPC system, we have to uphold the unity of the party leadership, the running of the country by the people, and law-based governance. Fellow deputies, I now wish to discuss our main tasks for the coming year. The year 2020 is the first year of the 14th Five-Year Plan, and we have to follow the strong leadership of the Party Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core, take Xi Jinping's thoughts on socialism with Chinese characteristics for a new era as our guide, and thoroughly study and implement Xi Jinping's thinking on the rule of law and his important ideas on upholding and improving the system of People's Congress. Implement all guiding principles from the party's 19th National Congress and from the 19th Party Central Committee's 2nd through 5th plenary sessions. Uphold the unity of party leadership, ground our efforts in a new development stage, put into practice our new development philosophy, and plan the NPC's work around the 14th Five-Year Plan and the long-range objective through the year 2035, and exercise statutory powers to enact laws, conduct oversight, make decisions, and appoint and remove officials in accordance with the law, and ensure the NPC fully plays its role. First, we will work to ensure greater observance to the Constitution and enhance reviews to safeguard the Constitution's authority. Second, we will strengthen legislative work in key areas and continue to improve the quality and efficiency of legislation. We will continue to apply systems thinking and give full play to the leading role of the NPC and allow the NPC to play a leading role in legislative work. And we will push ahead with legislative work in key areas and also improve the legislative system so that we can meet the demand of the people in building better lives. According to our legislative plan, we have plans to deliberate 45 legislative items, with close to 20 additional items in reverse. We will continue with the working plan for enacting and revising laws to strengthen the legal safeguards for public health. And we will also formulate laws to respond to public health emergencies. And we will also improve our support to livelihood, to education, culture, social governance, ecological preservation, and environmental protection. And we will also closely follow digital economy, internet finance, artificial intelligence, big data, and cloud computing, and their application in various fields. In the meantime, we are going to accelerate our pace in researching into foreign-related laws. And this includes laws to deal with some foreign-related affairs, so that we can form a system of legislation for foreign-related laws. We have to enhance on main areas while also improve our efficiencies of legislation. And in light of the actual needs and realities, we're going to expedite the legislation.
Third, we will strengthen oversight to ensure that state departments fulfill their duties in accordance with the law. The supervision and oversight work must center on the core tasks of the nation. We will try to implement the 6 stabilization tasks to maintain security in different targets. According to our oversight work plan, we have made preliminary arrangements for 29 oversight items. We have done the budgeting and decision-making and auditing, the rectification of problems, and so on. And as to the TCN law, the pollution control law, the solid waste prevention law, and other laws, we must deliberate them. Fourth, we will take solid steps to strengthen the work related to deputies to give full play to their role. We will intensify the working committee, legislative and supervision committees' participation in the work. We will also improve the suggestions quality by the deputies so as to truly keep a close contact with the people. As to the electoral system, we try to improve the selective system of the NPC deputies. Fifth, we will deepen and expand exchanges and cooperation at all levels and across all fields in order to strengthen NPC's work on foreign affairs. Sixth, we will intensify self-improvement efforts in order to lay a solid theoretical, political, and organizational foundation for the effective performance of our duties. Fellow deputies, on our new journey toward building a modern socialist country in all respects, we must rally even more closely around the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core. We will strengthen the consciousness of the need to maintain political integrity, think in big picture terms, follow the leadership core, and keep in alignment with the Central Party leadership. We will stay confident in the path, theory, system, and culture of socialism with Chinese characteristics. We will uphold Xi Jinping's core position on the Party Central Committee and accomplish our responsibilities to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the founding of CPC and work tirelessly to realize the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation.
That was from the Great Hall of the People. Chairman of the MPC Standing Committee, Li Zhanshu, just delivered a work report on the work of China's top legislature in the year 2020. He mainly focuses on 4 areas, namely enacting laws, conducting oversight, making decisions, and appointing and removing officials. He also laid out some key targets for the top legislature's work in the year 2021. Now, for more insight into that, let's talk to our studio guests. So, gentlemen, how about we start with those items in focus you raised earlier. So, Dr. Gao, you said it's about the national security law for Hong Kong. Actually, Chairman Li Zhanshu mentioned that quite a lot in his reports. What's your reading into his words?
Well, first of all, I think Chairman Li Zhanshu's speech on the work of the MPC Standing Committee for 2020 is a very important political document in China, and it laid out all the work, all aspects of the major things that the MPC Standing Committee and MPC at large have been doing for 2020, which was a very momentous year, a year of great importance, especially because of the pandemic and other major challenges that China is facing. And also, I think the way he laid out the major tasks for the MPC Standing Committee for 2021 is very important, including new legislations focusing on new areas. And also, he mentioned that there will be lots of legislations relating to China and the rest of the world. That means globalization in China is still a megatrend, and China is not isolating itself from the rest of the world, it's embracing the rest of the world. This should give hope to the rest of the world and to mankind as a whole. And I think the way he also mentions that the MPC need to exercise its function as a supervisory role for the other parts of the government, for example, this is also very important because China is in great transition, and China is in a flux in a sense, both economically speaking, politically speaking, and also in terms of new technology, digital technology, for example. So there will be lots of things that the whole country need to put a handle on, and NPC is playing a very important role in this particular regard.
How about, let me be specific, you mentioned that the year 2021 is very crucial for China's development. So you mentioned, of course, the fight against the impacts from the pandemic. Also, how about China's own development strategy? This is the year to fully realize China's first centenary goal. Because it's the 100th anniversary of the CPC's founding. So how about legislative work regarding this critical moment in China's history?
Absolutely. Chairman Li mentioned that this year, that's 2021, we'll celebrate the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China. And it's also the first year of the 14th five-year plan. And for this five-year period, it will be very important for China because it will demonstrate that China is not only becoming the second largest economy, but is consolidating its position as the second largest economy in the world, and also is moving forward very fast to become the largest economy as little as in a matter of less than 10 years. So we are reasonably expecting that by, let's say, 2030 at least, China will surpass the size of the US economy and become very, very sophisticated as an economy, developed in all major respects, and becoming more and more importantly as a force for peace and globalization. And, as you mentioned, for the protection of RPR rights. This also will require...
Sorry, let me to follow up on your earlier remarks. You mentioned that legislative work focuses on China's relationship with the rest of the world. So since you just mentioned China's economic development, so we just reported that the dual circulation strategy, China aims to build a strong domestic economy, but it's also part of the global economic circulation. So what are the key legislative targets raised by Chairman Li in his work report?
Absolutely. I think Chinese economy needs to go through lots of readjustments. You mentioned the dual circulation. Domestic economic growth is crucial and will be the core of the Chinese economic development. However, China's economy is very much integrated with the rest of the world. So import and export, trading of all kinds, and also learning from all the foreign countries involved will enable the Chinese domestic economic development to become more innovative and also enriching the experiences both for China as well as for the rest of the world. In this regard, I think NPC will have a lot of things to do to, for example, enact better laws, more effective laws to accommodate foreign investment into China. China and EU, for example, already finished the negotiation for this comprehensive investment agreement, which eventually will be submitted to the NPC for review and approval eventually. And I think how China and the rest of the world, especially the Western developed countries and also developing countries, can re-engage with each other to find a better way to re-engage and develop mutual relations with each other will be crucial. Lots of these things will require new legislations in China, and making sure that the way it is unfolding for China and the rest of the world will be smoother and also mutually beneficial.
And that's more of an upside, something you can embrace. But Mr. Tang, what about challenges and even provocations? For example, China is still facing some long-arm legislative interferences, if you will, from outside countries. How should China deal with that in its future development?
Well, I perhaps take a little bit of a different view on this. I think China has one of the strongest stories. 40 years of success, constantly delivering a better lifestyle for its people. China has a different sense of human rights. They believe it's important to be safe in the streets, in your home, in your school, in your job, to have economic opportunity, access to social services and things like this. Now, there's a lot of lip service in other places, but they're now in the part where China's economic footprint has become so large that it's attracting unwanted attention. In the West, if you look at the last 40 years, the middle classes have declined. both in terms of their buying power and their numbers. And this has led to a lot of social unrest and dissatisfaction with the status quo. So I don't think it's necessary always to do tit for tat with them. If Donald Trump or any other leader wants to engage in some sort of nasty action, China is not always taking the high road, but certainly the rest of the world is watching. And right now that makes 60% of the world's GDP. So I think China has a real opportunity to lead by example, to tell its story instead of responding to the narrative that the U.S. has. But in terms of direct attacks, I mean, it's very difficult to see how things in Taiwan are going to go well. I mean, if the U.S. And Biden continues to sail warships and have overflights and things like that, these are provocations which cross a red line. And this is the greatest danger, I think, to the world as a whole. This miscalculation that somehow China does not have resolve, that it won't follow through. And this is true whether it's on the Indian border, whether it's in Hong Kong, Xinjiang, or Tibet. China's borders are, it's a red line. China has opened many doors, all right? And it's very, very clear that it wants to engage in multilateralism, but it's often being met with fear, suspicion, I think mostly based on the sense of almost kind of jealousy. How can China be doing so well if we don't like their system? Whereas in the US, people say we have the best system, but somehow over the last 40 years, it hasn't developed, has not delivered the policies or the leadership that the U.S. has needed to reverse its current situation.
Talking about China's system, how about we be specific and talk about business environment, something you're quite familiar with. What are the legislative changes you've seen in the past year, and what are you expecting to happen? Because we also remember that Chinese leaders have mentioned this in several occasions. China is willing to join the CPTPP. That means a lot of legislative changes in the domestic markets, maybe.
And you can already see that. They're allowing bonds from these large entities to default. They've sent a very clear signal that no longer will there be any kind of blank check from the government to things that you have to stand up on your own. And that is an important part because the subsidy issue is really the main issue with joining the CPTPP. So at this juncture, China is moving it in that direction. They're also opening up as part of the reforms to the RCEP. China has kind of gone more than halfway down that line. So actually it's not as far as people think as long as China is able to follow through in that and join that. But there seems to be a lot of consternation. Exactly how will this kind of regionalism, which is growing, how will that work with somebody like the WTO, especially since Biden has few options to join the
CPTPP.
yes. Always get that mixed up. Or the RCEP. He might go back to WTO, but what does that mean? It means that he's going to have to deal with China. So, right now, all the international issues are pointed towards dealing with China if the U.S. wants to make progress on them, whereas domestically at home, the political tensions are high, driven by this kind of anti-China bias, both by government leaders and also in the press.
Well, gentlemen, I think it's time to talk a little bit more about Hong Kong. And first, let's get some updates. The draft decision on Hong Kong's electoral system is being reviewed and deliberated as the two sessions continues. Earlier, my colleague Tian Wei spoke to former Hong Kong Chief Executive Liang Chen-nin. He's also the Vice Chairman of the CPPCC. Liang shared his insights on what electoral changes mean for Hong Kong.
There are a lot of talk about how to improve the election system in Hong Kong. What are some of the details? As they say, devils are in the details. So what do you know now?
First of all, any electoral system in any society has to comply with the local circumstances. Hong Kong's electoral system has always been very different. Some might even say unique under the one country, two systems arrangement. And now the National People's Congress of China is proposing to improve the existing electoral system. And this is basically centered on the election committee, which so far has been given the responsibility of selecting the chief executive elect. if you look at the design of the political structure of the Hong Kong SAR government as prescribed in the Basic Law, you would realize that it's an executive-led government. So the election committee in the design of political structure in Hong Kong is very much the center of the formation or the creation of the political structure.
However, Mr. Liang, there have been debates about whether that means the election committee will have overpowering capabilities, for example, over the Legislative Council. Will Legislative Council still function as it used to be? What's your take?
The overriding principle is this. The governing bodies of Hong Kong must be in the hands of patriots. And this is something that the norm in all countries and all societies in the world. In the past couple of years, we have seen acts of disloyalty. For example, members of the election committee, members of our legislative council, members of the district council running off to Washington, D.C., not once, but several times during 2019, asking the U.S. government to sanction their own country, sanction their own society, Hong Kong. So these are obviously acts of disloyalty, and I would say that these people should not be allowed to sit on the election committee or to be part of our legislature, and definitely not to become a chief executive elect.
Also, some Hong Kong officials have expressed their views on how the principle of patriots administering Hong Kong relates to improving the city's electoral system.
需要靠中央帮我们来完善这个选举制度。
It's up to the central government to help us perfect this electoral system. This is an option that must be made. The development of Hong Kong's political system is in the hands of the National People's Congress and the NPC Standing Committee, which is clearly written in the Constitution, as well as the Annex 1 and 2 to the Basic Law of Hong Kong SAR.
It's perfectly justified that the governing power remains in the hands of patriots, because it is known to all that only when someone is patriotic can they fight and work for the country's interests. There has never been a region or a country that allows unpatriotic people to govern their place, so we must improve the electoral system.
So now we've realized that there are some public officials in Hong Kong who are actually loyal to foreign governments, or rather, they have absolutely no loyalty to their own country while openly breaking from it. This kind of future is very dangerous and horrifying. Therefore, under such circumstances, the people of Hong Kong from all walks of life must emphasize the need for patriots governing Hong Kong.
Now, for more insights, let's cross live to Mr. Alex Fan in Hong Kong. Alex, this may not be a surprise to you. Some critics have questioned the legal grounds of this time's improvement. What's your take?
In fact, the mechanism of the amendment to Basic Law is set out in Article 159, and paragraph 1 of 159 says that the power of amendment of this law shall be vested in the National People's Congress, namely NPC, and there is not mentioned anyone or entity other than the NPC has the power to amend the Basic Law. And the critics purportedly arise from the misinterpretation, if not misreading, of paragraph 2 of the same article. It deals with only the power to propose bills for amendment. And any one of NPCSC, the State Council, or the Hong Kong government has the power to propose amendment bills. It's about proposal, it's not about the proper right of amendment. And a specific procedure is in place for submission of amendment bills proposed by the Hong Kong government. And after all, the only restriction on such amendment lies in paragraph 4. No amendment to this law shall contravene the established basic policies of China regarding Hong Kong. And the amendment about election reform, of course, is within the established basic policies of China regarding Hong Kong. In fact, it is to safeguard the smooth and continuous implementation of one country, two systems. And the existing way of introducing the electoral system by amending Annex 1 and Annex 2 is entirely lawful, and it is in strict accordance with the Basic Law.
So, Alex, will all those measures you just mentioned hurt election rights of Hong Kong's local residents, as some opposition figures have been claiming?
In any place of the world, rights pertaining to election are prescribed by and, of course, subject to its own election laws. And the election rights are not freestanding rights. Rules and regulations about election vary across different places. And each place or country sets out their own rules or ways to deal with election, having regard to their own historical developments as well as societal circumstances. And to properly understand about the situation in Hong Kong and the need to improve our electoral system, the starting point is always that the practice of one country, two systems is subject to China's full power of governance over Hong Kong. And further, the high degree of autonomy is not unrestricted autonomy. And the proposed amendment here is in accordance with the Basic Law, which means it's undoubtedly lawful. Further, apart from that it is a lawful move, it is also a reasonable measure. The Central People's Government has a constitutional role to ensure the national interest and Hong Kong's interests are well secured and the national security is safeguarded. And if the loophole in the Hong Kong election system is not plugged, the continuous operation of one country, two systems will be left in peril.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alex Fan in Hong Kong. For more on that, CGTN also interviewed one Swiss businessman who's been living in Hong Kong for 3 years. He shared his